Hey, before we begin our episode today, I want to remind you about some things concerning tech support. Firstly, our winter break will be over on February 23rd, so make sure you're subscribed to get updated whenever we release a new episode. Also in the show notes now, you can find a couple of cool new links, including the Send Us a Text button. Remember, when you send us a text, we can't actually see if it's from you or not, so make sure you include your name and email if you'd like us to respond to you. In the links in our show notes as well, you'll find the link to our email newsletter. Don't forget, it's only going to be sent to you monthly, so fear not, we're not going to spam you. Make sure you subscribe soon so that you'll be entered to win a reference book on the New Testament world. Make sure you enter that so we can put your name in there for the drawing. Lastly, we have a cool new podcast website that you can find at techsupportpodcast.com. Again, you can also find that linked in the show notes. We talk about these updates in more detail in the most recent episode of Tech Support titled Tech Support Show Updates, and you can find more information there. But for now, I'll let you get back to your episode.
Welcome to Tech Support, a podcast of the Mount Juliet Church of Christ, where we encourage and equip people to interact with the biblical text. We are your hosts, Tim Martin and Brian LeMasters.
We are back for another episode of our series of Truth Illustrated, where we're looking through some of Jesus' parables. Today, we're going to be in Luke chapter 16, and if you're driving your car or exercising, no worries. We will read through this as we talk about it as well, because we think it'll be good as we dig into this text for you to be a little bit more familiar with it. Tim, this parable is interesting. A lot of different people say it's a harder one to interpret just because of some of the ethical questions kind of related to it and the example given in the parable. So we'll go ahead and jump into this. We won't
forget to tell them about the newsletter.
Oh, I had it in bold and I forgot. Yes.
Right there in your notes.
Blaine's going to get mad at us here, but yes. Hey, for this year, we are doing something new. We have a newsletter that will go out on a monthly basis that gives you maybe additional notes or just kind of a heads up of some things that we're going to be studying. You can sign up for that by clicking on the show notes and going to the website, and a lot of different information there that you may want to explore, but make sure you get signed up for the newsletter there. All right, let's jump into it. I'm going to read verses 1 and 2 to kind of just set the scene, and then we can kind of go from there. Luke chapter 16, starting verse 1. He also said to the disciples, "There was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was wasting his possessions. And he called him and said to him, 'What is this that I hear about you? Turn in the account of your management, for you can no longer be manager.'" All right, Tim, I would say the first question that we have is piggybacking off of maybe where we were in chapter 15. What's our audience here?
Well, when we look back and he has just got through, we just got through with like the most famous parable in all of history, I guess, or maybe second next to the Good Samaritan with the prodigal son. Mm-hmm. And so you and I talked about this audience. He says he said to his disciples, but it does seem if we continue reading in 16 that there are also others who he had been talking to, a larger group of people like the Pharisees that are listening peripherally, I guess, to this. He's teaching, and these people are getting a free lunch. They're getting to listen to what Jesus has to say and get this training. And so this is a very strange parable that we have here with this setup, but I don't think it's an indictment against wealthy people or anything along that nature, but I do think he has a larger audience than just the 12 disciples.
Yeah, and verse 14 is where the Pharisees will start kind of grumbling about what he said there. Mm-hmm. But it is directed towards his disciples there. All right, what's the dynamic here? Or kind of explain this like work relationship, I guess you could say, of there's being this rich man and a manager. You got any insights or things we should know about the...
Well, it's debated whether we would think that he is not a slave. Often you would have a slave that we think about slaves like we do in like the modern 18th, 19th century Western United States and Western Caribbean United States, is that they're just field workers. They're people that just do menial type labor. But in that day and time, a slave may very well be an educated person or someone who manages someone's store or their possessions or manages other slaves. In this case, obviously, he's managing these guys, his books I mean, he seems like he's kind of the bookkeeper and businessman for this guy. I don't think this guy is a slave because you don't really fire slaves. And him letting him go, and this guy, he doesn't say, "I'm going to put you doing something else" or whatnot. It may be, but it's more likely he may be either a freeborn person or a freed person. He seems a little bit older. He says, I'm not able to dig. I don't have the strength to dig. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And he's too ashamed to beg. And so I don't think he's a slave. Maybe he could be. But it was,
seems like he has a lot of authority.
He does. And one of the things that we'll see is he has essentially almost what we might call a power of attorney for this wealthy man to be able to adjust his debts, to incur debts, to get people to agree to debts with him. And even to partially forgive some of these debts. And so he has been irresponsible, I guess, with those things. And he says, "Hey, I need you to turn in your books." He's getting his pink slip here. He says at the end of 2 that you read, you can no longer be manager. And so I don't think he's getting demoted to another position because his concern coming up is going to be, where am I going to live? And what am I going to do for a living? How am I going to feed myself?
All right. How about you go ahead and read 3 through 8? The heart of the
long reading.
parable.
You give me the long reading. It's real challenging.
You got an English Bible in front of you?
I do have an English Bible.
I threw you off the other day.
I
when
do.
You
did.
Greek,
That's right. I only had a Greek Bible. Couldn't read that fast. This is from the ESV translation here. And the manager said to himself, "What shall I do, since my master is taking the management away from me? I am not strong enough to dig, and I am ashamed to beg. I have decided what to do, so that when I am removed from management, people may receive me into their homes." So, summoning his master's debtors one by one, he said to the first, "How much do you owe my master?" He said, 100 measures of oil. And he said to him, "Take your bill and sit down quickly and write 50. Then he said to another, "And how much do you owe?" He said, 100 measures of wheat. He said to him, "Take your bill and write 80. The master commended the dishonest manager for his shrewdness, for the sons of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the sons of light. You know, I never have thought till I got through when I was reading that. If I was the second guy, I'd be like, how come first dude got to get rid of 50% of his debt? And I only got to get rid of 20% of his debt. Maybe wheat's worth more money. You want to give him back.
Yeah, they're not standing there next to one another.
Maybe not. Of course, it's not a real story, but I'm saying there's just a little bit of a jip there. I wish somebody'd come to me and say, write off half of anything you owe would be nice.
All right, so Tim, probably the primary question that a lot of people would have here reading through this is, it seems like Jesus is like praising this guy.
He's advocating for people
for being unethical here.
Yeah. What is he being unethical? You know, at the conclusion, the master doesn't take it to be unethical. But of course, remember, we're not talking about a real story here or a real life narrative that happened. Jesus is trying to make a point. So he uses maybe things that do seem preposterous, but I don't think it means that Jesus is advocating for you cheating your master. But
so what is the main point then? Like, how is
the
this
main
guy?
point? And we'll see as we talk about Jesus is this guy is making friends. Essentially, he's making friends. I think it's probably fair to assume that the people he's dealing with are at the same socioeconomic class as the manager here,
because it's a lot of debt.
It is a lot of debt, and these are not poor people. These measures are large in quantity, maybe even exaggerated by Jesus to make it even more so. But he is saying, I need to figure out a way to make sure I got somewhere to live when I get done with this. And like we talked about in the previous episode, there's a principle of reciprocity in this world, meaning if I do something for you, you are obligated to return that favor. It's a quid pro quo. So this guy is helping these people out. Maybe the first one needed more help than the other one. I don't know in doing that. But these people are going to owe him something when he gets out, whether it's a job or it's somewhere to live or whatever that one, maybe another manager's job.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know that I would hire the guy. You're going to write down all my debt. But
definitely a stronger obligation than today in our society.
Yeah. This is almost as strong as like Christmas card sending, where somebody sends you a Christmas card the next year. You will live a life of utter shame if you don't send them back a Christmas card. But it goes to that same point. And so he is endearing these guys to obligating these guys to give him something when he gets out. And so that's the shrewdness of it. not necessarily this is how we ought to manage people's money. That's not what this parable is about.
All right, a couple technicality things here. Sons of this world. How should people generally understand what's being referenced there? And sons of light in verse 8 there.
I've seen different thoughts about what is Jesus speaking of? Is he metaphorically speaking of everybody in this life, in this realm, or is he speaking about people outside of Israel versus the sons of light that are the people of God and ought to be preparing better for their quote-unquote future? And I mean future, I mean eternal future. That's kind of the best explanation, I guess, I have heard. We might compare this to when Paul talks about, deeds of the flesh and fruit of the spirit. Here's the worldly side and here's the side that ought to be godly. But I think that what Jesus is saying is even the wicked people of this world or the crooked people of this world or the scheming people of this world are more shrewd in how they deal with things than the people of Israel. And it makes sense if we have who's listening get irritated. Anytime we see them get irritated at something Jesus says, most often it's they perceive he's insulting them in some way.
Yeah. And it's not just about craftiness, but it's about preparation for the future.
That's right. Right. Covering your bases, I guess, if you will. And he's called a dishonest manager because he is a dishonest manager. He's squandered his master's resources before, but maybe in his shrewdness, the master looks at him and thinks, okay, the guy owed me 100 measures of oil. He wasn't going to repay it, but he repaid 50. And this guy owed me 100 measures of wheat. He can't repay that, but he could repay 80. It's kind of like when you settle with a credit card company or some other kind of debt. You're better off to get something than nothing or keep waiting for your possessions or your debts to be paid. It's interesting that one of the things I read was most often, and I don't know where the source of this is, but most often in that world, if you were going to go in debt to me, I would have you fill out the paperwork. So it's in your handwriting. You can't deny that you took on the debt. You're the one that wrote it out. I didn't write it out. I didn't cross something out and write something in. It's not just in good faith. It's the sense that you would made this. So the process of me telling you write down your debt means, okay, we agree on it and you put your John Hancock on it. That's what we did.
In verse 9, it mentions, and I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of unrighteous wealth, so that when it fails, they may receive you into eternal dwellings. There's kind of two trains of thoughts there. I think one has more support than the other based on the sources I was looking at, but it could be means of unrighteous wealth as in like you did unethical things to get the money, or just it's talking about just kind of it's wealth of this world. And that's the line of thought that I kind of go to. It's not so much about how you gained it, but it's really just talking about worldly wealth is the way that I kind of see it there. So I didn't know if you had a...
I don't think it's filthy lucre. I don't think it's filthy lucre like you see. Mammon is that word, that is translated wealth there from the Aramaic word or Hebrew word mammon. I don't know that it means that it's wealth that was acquired illegally or unrighteously, but it's referring kind of that general idea of this just something of this world and that nature, or maybe even how you take that wealth and you deal with it, like the unrighteous steward or the dishonest manager did.
All right, with this parable, it is unique in that the conversation continues on in the following verses. Anything else you want to throw in there before we move on here, Tim?
No, I think that there's a simple meaning to this. It is a very complex sounding parable. And really even knowing the ancient context doesn't really help you understand it a whole lot. It gives some nuance to it, I guess, as we've discussed. But ultimately, it's it's kind of storing up for yourself treasure in heaven type thing.
Yeah.
It's being prepared for the eternal home, the place you're going to be, and be shrewd about that. Not dishonest, but be shrewd about that. And store up for yourself a place. Make sure you got a place in heaven and pay attention to that. Not in the same way that people in the world are so obsessed with storing up treasure in the bank or in whatever. These people would have been treasured storing up honor and prestige and patronage, whatever that may be. Saying, hey, they're shrewd about that. Why can't the people of God figure out that they need to be prepared and be conscientious of what they're doing for the future?
Yeah.
I think that's what it means.
All right. So in 10 and the following verses, Jesus is going to kind of elaborate on some ideas here. I'll read through those. One who is faithful in a very little is also faithful in much, and one who is dishonest in very little is also dishonest in much. If then you have not been faithful in the unrighteous wealth, who will entrust you to the true riches? And if you have not been faithful in that which is another's, who will give you that which is their own? No servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. All right, so Tim, opening question here. How is that connected to this parable?
It's hard to connect. We usually it has to be connected, well, or it has to at least build off of the parable. I don't know that it's necessarily an explanation in the same way that Jesus explains, like the parable of the sower, where he says, okay, this is what that is, this is what this was. I don't really know that that the unrighteous steward or the unjust steward or the master are meant to be metaphors for God and this, that, and yon.
Yep.
Maybe they are. But here, I think
it is a parable that deals with money.
That's right. And so I think it's Jesus' introduction. He does that. He said, okay, well, while we're talking about money, let's remember about being one who's faithful in very little is also faithful in very much. I don't know. I might be more faithful with a little bit of money than I would be a lot of money. But is dishonest in a very little is also dishonest. So, if you can't trust somebody with a dime, you can't trust them with a dollar and vice versa in that nature. And so, but he does go on to talk about the unrighteous wealth and entrust with you the true riches. So could it be that Jesus he's speaking to the other extended audience for the benefit of the disciples and being like, God trusted y'all with, he said y'all too. That's the way Jesus talked. He said, God trusted y'all. He said it like that too. Y'all with just a little bit, just with the Torah, with really no obligation to be, to expand the people of God. There's not an evangelistic command to Israel to go out and spread the Torah to the world, even though, we do see some proselytes coming to Judaism, but it's not like what we see in like the Great Commission, where it's just this thing to take it to the world. Y'all were trusted with that, and you didn't do good with it. You weren't trusted with being the people of God, with being faithful to God, with your fealty to God. And so how can I trust you with the big stuff, which is the gospel? Now, I may be putting more allegorical interpretation into that than it is, but if it says, if you've not been faithful in that which is another's, how will you get, and who will give you that which is your own?
There's definitely a physical to spiritual.
Yeah, I think there's a transition and a tension there, and I'm not so sure that 13 should be read alone about just money and things of this world. I think without having this prelude to it and think about this trust, who is he talking to about serving money and God? Well, he can't be talking to most of his disciples unless he's got Judas in his mind, who's been skimming money off the money bag. But is he speaking to, is money literal here? Is money metaphorical? Has he shifted gears where now he is talking about what we usually interpret this passage to mean, meaning you're either going to want money and fame and fortune and whatever worldly things, or are you more concerned about the things of God? But now he doesn't.
I still think it's applicable to them, even if they gave up a lot to follow him.
Mm-hmm.
Their security, like when he leaves them, like money's still going to be.
Oh no, I don't disagree with that. I mean, as far if he's speaking to people who have money right then, it's probably not those guys. They haven't worked for a living and maybe in a while, but we definitely can't be enslaved to one or the other. And so I don't know that this is a continued explanation of that parable. I think that parable that we've studied kicks this off and maybe leads into what I understand is not unusual for a teacher or a rabbi to just keep rattling on good things and keeping the motif of money going. I'm going to teach you some other things about money and your relationship with money. But that doesn't 13 does not necessarily explain 1 through 8. Does that make sense?
Yeah. The line of thought that I could see there is from the parable, Jesus is establishing this idea of, as people of God or children of light, you should use your resources you have here on earth for eternity, for heavenly things, for spiritual things. and recognize that if you're faithful with those things, more blessings will come to you. And remember, you can't serve, your heart can't be all about money and God at the same time.
Mhm.
So it's almost like trying to establish a proper perspective of wealth and money and how those things are connected to one's future, not just from a physical standpoint, like in the parable. So,
and maybe we could put anything we want to in this blank for mammon, for wealth or money. Is, you can't serve God in popularity. You can't serve God. And, even when we think about how we do our family, are the things that we tend to put our family, our children, our jobs, our relationships with some people above God. If those relationships are unhealthy, are we willing to walk away from them? If it's destroying our relationship with God, but certainly here we're talking about money, and
but that principle Jesus hits on it.
Oh yeah, that's not the first time he's talked about that. And I think about the reversing of gears. This manager was responsible for a lot, and so he couldn't be trusted with a lot or a little in what he did. And so I can see where the building blocks of the rest of the conversation are there. I'm sure that there's all sorts of different ways this passage has been looked at. But in some ways, I think about the principle of using our resources, for example. Sometimes our resources may be monetary. Sometimes they may simply be time. But they may also be our knowledge of God's word. I'm going to take this real far afield in thinking about this, but just in principle that, can we be trusted with our knowledge of God's word and the responsibility he gives us? Does God proportionally give us responsibility to do more, give us more opportunity to teach people, to reach out to people, if we're responsible with the little? We think about that, like, for example, deacons, have they passed the test before they're allowed to be a deacon? A lot of times we would look at a deacon or an elder or someone and say, hey, well, they seem to have taken these little bits of responsibility that we hopefully have consciously given to them to build them up for larger aspects of leadership. I'm not saying that's what he's teaching here, but
the principle,
if we've been dishonest with that, and dishonest is a strong term, but I just wonder if that principle would be there too. And it's not just talking about just money, but there's an underlying principle that Jesus is talking about, and it does seem to rub the Pharisees the wrong way, because it does say in 14, lovers of money heard all these things and they ridiculed him. So he obviously was irritated, and he's obviously speaking, maybe tongue in cheek, because
they think life's all about money. So
and I really hate to think that all the Pharisees were that way. We know there's some good people. Like,
I don't mean that, but I meant the ones in the audience,
the ones that are offended
like,
by that.
Yeah.
They were probably wealthy people among the Pharisees. We know there were Sadducees as well. And so some of them were. Hopefully there's some people that were involved in the Jewish religious leadership, like Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus, who were, closet disciples of Jesus, who didn't feel that way. But a lot of people say that they loved having money and power and having a lot of clients. If they were, patrons in a patron-client system, having a lot of people that relied on them, looked up to them. But it's a shame, because they are the people who should have been trusted with, the covenant with Israel. They sure can't be trusted with the covenant, the bigger covenant, the big ticket item, the final and much larger covenant. They just can't be trusted. They haven't proved themselves to be good stewards.
Yeah. I think they've
been dishonest with it. They've been dishonest with it, to be honest with you.
The big thing that I'm challenged by, or the thought that I'm challenged by here, is I feel like if I can put a proper perspective in my mind of viewing myself as a steward, I've placed myself in a much better place to be a better follower of Jesus and more in line with what God's called me to do in my life. I feel like stewardship is like this idea that we see pop up time and time again in the Gospels and Jesus' teachings here.
I agree. We don't really see it. We don't like to talk about stewardship until it comes time to talk about something financial. But in truth, stewardship in the Bible is really not talked about in a financial sense like we might think about it. Because the people who are following Jesus, they really that many of them had that much money to manage. But anything God's given us, whether it's our money or it's our time or it's our home or it's our intellectual ability, if it's our educational opportunities that we've had, if it's our work opportunities that we've had, to capitalize on them for God's betterment and for the betterment of the gospel is great. And being a good steward of our money today, we as Americans have more money than most of these people that we're talking about in the Bible ever dreamed of. But obviously there are people in the book of Acts who had property, for example, and they liquidated that property and they used those resources then to help people that were in need. We see that in Acts 2. We see it again, I think, at the end of Acts 4. And then we see what happens like when Ananias and Sapphira lie about it. And so even if you didn't have money, being a landowner was good. And so people were willing to take that. And, none of us have really been willing to do that, is to sell our property. I don't know what these people wind up living and doing. But, being a good steward of things is, I think, taking what God's given us and make it the best for the kingdom. And I think in our responsibility as husbands, wives, parents, that's also a good stewardship in making sure that we take care of those responsibilities that God's given us. But with here, I think it is a focus on wealth and an indictment, an underhanded or backhanded indictment against the Pharisees that are sitting there. Yeah.
And for the disciples there to prepare for the future, like to recognize.
That's right.
That's coming.
One day, if they've ever got any money, we have to do something with this.
Thank you for joining us for tech support. Check out the description below for additional ways you can connect to us and some of our upcoming teachings. To our fellow students of Scripture, thank you for joining us. We hope you will join us next week.
This is a podcast of the Mount Juliet Church of Christ. You can find more personal growth resources like this one at mountjuliet.org/resources. The Mount Juliet Church of Christ exists to glorify God and make disciples by helping people grow in Christ, love one another, and serve others.